Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, at least we made it to the 1st of February in 2021, and it seems to be a little better than last year. Today I have some terrifying, but very, very interesting encounters. Before we get into today's upload, a couple of links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting, stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link. Give those stories a listen. You may or may not like what you hear. Last, but definitely not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters. Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those links are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of everyone's time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. Okay, I'm going to start off by mentioning that I live in Oregon. Not quite a rural town, but our town is small, only about a 10-minute drive from what you would actually consider a rural town or area. Everyone's heard about the cryptids and lore of the Oregon woods. I hate these woods. They're just vast and terrifying, but at the same time, tempting and beckoning, almost. I stay out of the woods. I don't hunt or fish. And I might go hiking every once a couple of years with friends, but I make it a point to not go where I don't feel safe. I kind of brushed off all of the stories about the woods here until I had an experience of my own. And I'm ready to share what I saw that night. My friend and I work graveyard shift at a local bakery, and we always carpool. She picks me up at about 11:30. The bakery itself is in more of a rural area, but the main road into town takes us almost all the way out there. It's a well-lit road until you get slightly out of town, and since it's a main road through town, even at night, there are usually passing cars or people walking. From my house, it takes about 10 minutes to get to work using this road. For about 3 months, this road was being repaved. We'd have to stop literally right before the turn into the bakery and wait for construction crew to finish whatever project they were doing. After 2 nights of being stopped right outside of work for over an hour, and an estimated date of construction being done being 3 months out, we decided to start taking the back roads to work. The back way to work was on the opposite side of town of this main road. It took us out of town around the outskirts of town and finally to the bakery for a total of about 30 minutes travel time instead of 10. This back road was completely surrounded by heavy woods. There was a private drive to a house every 5 or so miles. No streetlights, no passing cars, no pedestrians. This road was also extremely curvy. Just constant twists and turns. As expected, we see a lot of deer and the occasional possum, squirrel, etc. This particular night, we started our journey through the back roads, just as we had all week. We got about 10 miles through when my friend went around this bend and then suddenly slammed on her brakes. I was on my phone, so I wasn't looking up when she saw it first. I looked up, and right in front of the car is this gigantic buck. I'm talking huge, not moose size, but definitely one of the largest bucks I had ever seen. He was staring directly at us through the windshield. We were just kind of frozen for a moment for some reason. We both looked down at the feet of the deer, and in between its front feet was a dead raccoon. It was clearly a raccoon. Its face was pointed towards us. Ringlets on the tail, basically a stereotypical raccoon, except this thing was huge. Now, the buck was large, but basically, large bucks are not unheard of. This raccoon was the size of a huge dog, like the size of a mastiff. We looked back at the deer, and it was staring right at us, like it was making eye contact with both of us. My friend flashed her high beams and honks the horn at hope to scare it off. It doesn't run off, though. Without breaking eye contact with us, it starts to walk toward the car. Very slowly. We both are freaking out at this point, and my friend throws the car in reverse, backs up, and swerves around the deer. This entire time, it moves its head to keep eye contact with us. We back up, pull to the side, and drive away. We look back behind us, and this thing is just standing in the road staring at us as we drive away. We finally went around a curve, and I lost sight of it. But until then, it never stopped staring at us. We talk about this a lot, and about how weird it was. I didn't think deer ate meat. I'm not a deer expert. I just assumed they were herbivores. So, the standing over the dead raccoon was the most unsettling part, even over the constant eye contact. Luckily, we weren't dumb enough to get out of the car, but I always wonder what would have happened if we did. Since then, I've been more aware of the lore around. I've heard unsettling noises and screams coming from the woods, but this was the only actual encounter I had. Am I thinking too much into this, or is it a little weird to anyone else? There's so many legends and stories of cryptids around here, and I'm sure you've all read about the fucked up stuff that happens at Crater Lake. Just thought this might be an interesting encounter for you guys to listen to. I really hope people believe me, and honestly, if they don't, I don't care, but I know it's hard to believe something you didn't see with your own eyes. Today's second encounter. I'll start off with a little background. I'm currently 23, married with 2 daughters, not to mention my wife's pregnant. I'm a local truck driver in Houston, delivering lumber to mostly new residential construction sites. I'm 6 feet tall, between 180 to 190 pounds, 3/4 white, 1/4 American Indian. I won't name my tribe out of respect to my people. I'm the oldest of my great-grandfather's 40 great-grandchildren, which means I've learned all of our history, secrets, and legends that only my tribe's elders can tell you. Anyway, my experience was on the 20th of July, 2012. It was a Friday night. I was 19 at the time and didn't have many responsibilities other than delivering pizza part-time. So naturally, being a teenager, I was out with friends at a house party in Old Katy, a suburb west of Houston, Texas. My friends and I experimented both with marijuana and alcohol, but we were always responsible enough to make sure one of us stayed sober and to be a designated driver. That particular night was my turn to be the sober one. My friend Brennan had gotten well past drunk, and once he was started to behave reckless, I decided it was time to leave the party and take him home. He didn't want me to take him home, so instead he asked me to drive him to one of his friend's house that I'm not really familiar with. This friend, who I only remember as Joey, lived on the far west outskirts of Katy. I took a road called Morton Road to get there. We rode with the driver-passenger windows down so Brennan could get some fresh air. The street is one turn off of Morton, called Bartlett. My sense of direction is fairly superior. I've delivered pizzas all throughout Katy, and have since become a local truck driver in Houston. Bartlett had 3 or 4 houses on the right side, and on the west side was a fairly large forested area, maybe 40 or so acres, and dead ends just past the last house. I had noticed the moon was full before I even went out that night, and vaguely noted it as I got to Joey's house, the second house on the right, and parked my car on the left side of the road, closest to the trees. I helped Brennan get out of the car and walked him to the porch. Joey came out and thanked me for dropping him off, and we said goodbye. I decided to smoke a cigarette before I left. At the time, I shared a car with my dad, and his number one rule was no smoking in the car. After lighting my cigarette, it didn't take long to notice that the road was eerily silent. I assume I didn't notice it before, as I was helping my noisy, drunk friend get inside of the house. Maybe 3 drags into my cigarette, I heard heavy footsteps going across the gravel, maybe 100 feet in front of me. I was alarmed at the sound they made, similar to the sound of pulling something metal against concrete. Just so we're clear, my fears have always been werewolves. I've always been into horror movies. I love scaring myself, but the only monster to pop up in my dreams have been werewolves. Here I am alone, standing on a dark road under a full moon, and I hear something big walking as well. Too close to comfort for me. I didn't hesitate to throw down my cigarette, jump in the car. I told myself as I was getting in that I wouldn't turn on my headlights so I wouldn't have to see what was in front of me, and simply reverse my way back onto Morton and get the hell out of there. Unfortunately for me, my car had automatic lights that turned on as soon as you started the engine, a fact that I was aware of but in my panic seemed to ignore. Immediately in front of me, about 100 feet, as I had guessed, was a 6.5 to 7 foot beast on 2 legs. It was covered in black fur with a body of a gym-addicted man and a head of what I guess could be similar to a German shepherd or a black wolf. It had human-like feet covered in dark fur as well, with large claws sticking out about 2 inches. And it held its left hand out the same way a human would reach for something in front of them. I noticed that the fingers ended in large claws as well. While this was enough to cause my jaw to drop, what got me the most was that it was wearing torn blue jeans that seemed to be too tight and unnaturally torn, and an open flannel blue shirt that was ripped at the bulky shoulders. It looked my way when the lights revealed it, and glared at me with narrowed yellow eyes bearing its large fangs. My windows were still down, and I hadn't touched my radio, so I had no trouble hearing the loud growl it let out. It then turned its head to the forest, dropped on all fours, and ran out of sight into the trees. All of this took place in about 20 seconds, but honestly felt like hours. At this point, I literally had tears in my eyes, but didn't hesitate for 1 second longer to shove my car in reverse and put the gas pedal to the metal. I heard loud growling and grunting as I was leaving. I reversed onto Morton Road and went 80 to 90 miles an hour down the streets leading back to Katy, and didn't slow down till I was on the interstate. While still on Morton, I kept my eyes in front of me and sobbed the whole time because I'd never been so scared in my life. I can swear that the look I got from this creature was communicating to me that I had no business seeing him, and he wanted me gone. The look reminded me of criminals on TV being caught in their wrongdoings and wanting to cause harm to those who saw it. I got home, ran inside, and called my Scottish Terrier into my room and didn't sleep till the sun was up. To this day, I've never had the desire nor the nerve to go back to that part of Morton Road. I was obsessed over the idea that I had seen a werewolf and researched werewolf sightings on Google, and was intrigued by the Beast of Bray Road and the Michigan Dogman sightings and everything else that came up. I was disappointed to see that nothing I found on the web was precisely what I saw, while the beasts others had encountered seemed very similar. None were spotted wearing clothes. I told my mother and father about what I had seen, and while my mother could tell I was being genuine, my father was more interested in me driving that far from home without letting him know, so I stopped talking about it. Of the 7 people outside of my family I told, only my now wife and my one friend seemed to believe me. Most laughed and asked stupid questions such as, "Did you ask the werewolf if he got the vampires yet?" and similar things to that. It wasn't hard to notice that my story sounds far-fetched, especially considering the fact that I couldn't find any other reported sightings near the Houston area, nor much in Texas recently either. I never submitted my encounter online because I was scared of being ridiculed, or to be honest, scared that if I did say my story, that somehow the creature would find out and hunt me down. I'm honestly positive I'll never stop being haunted by the memory of this creature. It's just too vivid and too frightening to put out of my mind. I also never told Brennan, a friend that I dropped off there that night, what I saw. In fact, I didn't see him again for 2 years until accidentally bumping into him at a gas station in South Katy. My grandmother took interest in my encounter and told me the legend of our tribe's skinwalkers and cursed enemies, which was very interesting and very disturbing. I'm not able to give too much detail out of respect for my tribe, but I'll say this. Our skinwalkers are very different from the Navajo tribe's tales. They would transform into either bear or wolves when wars would break out. Once the leader of their enemies were caught, the skin wolf, our nickname, would bite and infect them, damning them to become half-wolf monster on a full moon, similar to most werewolf legends. Our ancestors' spirits are most powerful and prominent during the full moon, and it is them who would force our enemies into their transformation. The curse would be passed down from every eldest male of each new generation of the cursed enemy's descendants. I normally would call BS or just a scary story, but after the night of my sighting and what followed 4 years later, let's just say I've opened my mind. The summer of 2016, my wife and my mom went shopping at Barnes & Noble's, noticed a book by an author who was a cryptozoologist, and who I followed on social media in case of hearing anything similar to my experience, and thought I'd like it. I couldn't put it down, and after reading a chapter where a woman in Tennessee saw a clothed creature, I decided that after 4 years of hesitating, it was time to write her. She believed my story and told me a lot of people reported things similar to mine, and I let her in on my tribe's legend to give both of us an angle we hadn't considered as far as learning what this creature was. My horror was not over. In September of 2016, I was delivering lumber to a new neighborhood in Katy, right near the goddamn Bartlett Road. The way it's set up is you've got Avenue D and Bartlett Road running parallel to each other with Franz Road cut off connecting them in between, which is where I was en route to a new developing neighborhood and blew out a tire. My work truck doesn't come with a spare, so I had to call my boss to send a service truck out to replace my tire. All I could do was wait. I smoked a couple of cigarettes, listened to some horror stories on YouTube, and started working on lyrics. I'm a songwriter. When a truck came down the darkened road, I assumed it was the tire guy, but the truck was an old beat-up, probably 98 F-150, red with a single cab. The truck slowed as it came by my truck, and he rolled down his window. I didn't pay it much attention, but I looked up in his direction. His face was hidden, but in a rougher, quiet voice, he asked, "Hey, bud, is everything all right? Anything I can help with?" I said, "No thanks, sir. I've got a service truck due here in about 5 minutes from now to fix my tire. I appreciate your concern and courtesy, though. Thank you again." The man turned his head sharply towards me and sniffed the air, then smiled, revealing very yellow teeth with canines that honestly looked like fangs of a vampire. What freaked me out the most was that son of a bitch was wearing a blue flannel shirt with patches on the shoulders. The werewolf I had saw had a torn blue flannel shirt on, and I don't believe the coincidence, not after everything I had seen. My eyes widened in shock, and his smile grew more sinister as he said, "I remember you." "What?" I stammered. "I remember you," he growled loudly in a demonic-sounding voice. In his eyes, I shit you not, turned yellow. The tire truck came down the road at that moment, and the man looked annoyed, but still very satisfied with himself. He looked at me, his eyes normal and his teeth just yellow but not sharp, and said, "See you around, Blake." I almost pissed myself right then and there, hearing him say my name. "Fuck you, you fucking monster," I breathed audibly to myself. But he was already pulling away. I got his license plate, but didn't call it in. I mean, what the hell do I say to the cops? Yeah, this dude just drove by and freaked me out. I think he's a werewolf because he has the same shirt on that I saw 4 years ago. It just was not an option. I haven't seen the man since then and still refuse to go out at night on a full moon. It's just not worth the risk to me. I know most people wouldn't believe me, but honestly, I could care less if you do or you don't. I know what I saw. I know I'm not crazy. The stuff of legends isn't just legends. This all has proved to me that the world we know is full of things we can never possibly understand. My advice to you is to not put yourself into situations that would be bad in a horror movie. I was a lucky survivor. You just might be the first unlucky victim of the never-ending hunger and rage of this beast. Today's third part of the upload. I live in rural British Columbia. My community is surrounded by woods, and there's always been someone seeing Bigfoot or hearing whistles. Not my story, but it happened to a local in 2019. A mushroom picker went up way behind my grandma's house, which is in between my community and the nearest town. The mushroom picker turned around to face an empty field, and when he heard something crashing through the brush, according to the picker, a deer ran right past him, missing him by inches. Knowing he was about to confront a predator that was hunting the deer, he turned back to the field to see what it was. Perhaps a cougar or a bear or something completely expected. Nope, it wasn't at all. The picker says just as he turned, he saw this black furry thing stop running on all fours and stand up on the other side of the field, revealing itself. The picker said he turned around instantly and ran back to his truck a couple miles down the highway, just thankful that this creature he saw did not follow him. Today's fourth encounter. I'm not making an official report because it's been a long time, and I've always brushed this incident off. At the time I was about 8 years old. I really can't recall what year it was, 60, 63. Since this was many years ago and nobody believed me since I was a kid. I'd spent the summer at my grandmother's house on Shank Road in Middleton, Maryland, Frederick County. As I had a couple of years in a row, I welcomed the summers I spent with my grandma except for the damn outhouse. If I had to go out at night, I was a nuisance having to take grandma with me, which meant waking her up. It was an awful part of being there. One late night, I had got up to use the outhouse, and it was stark black outside. No lamp posts or outdoor lighting lined the main lane. Grandma had electricity, but it was only for the house, inside oven and appliances. She had a TV, a very old floor model, and nobody watched it anyway, since there was not much TV on in Maryland airwaves back in the 60s. It had to be like 3 in the morning when I ventured outside. I didn't take a flashlight and didn't want to wake up Grandma for finding the flashlight or for her to walk to the outhouse with me. The outhouse was located far enough from the main grouping of structures on the property and the main house for obvious reasons. It wasn't a full moon, more like a half a moon that night, but enough nighttime illumination in the sky that my eyes adjusted quickly to see the grounds. I could easily navigate my way using Grandma's long and narrow flower garden as a guiding trail. My biggest fear was the black snakes and copperheads because I was constantly warned to look for them. I made my way down to the outhouse and don't even remember hearing any usual night noises like crickets or owls. It seemed almost too quiet. I was a sharp and smart kid with a great imagination, but not enough to make this story up. I felt an uncanny sensation of being watched, and I started to get scared. I left the outhouse, peeking outside first, and for some reason wanted to run back to the house, getting there safely and quickly as possible. It was rough and a long run, and I tried quickly and began walking the last few hundred feet to the porch of the house. Something told me to look back where I had been. To this day, I wish I hadn't. What I saw was an impossible sight. This animal stepping through the backyard of Grandma's property just past the garden, about 10 feet past the outhouse. It was this upright, furry creature with a dog-wolf head. I've worn German shepherds from the age of 7, so the head was almost similar to the ears and snout of a German shepherd. I stopped dead in my tracks, not believing my eyes, because it was impossible. I stopped dead in my tracks, not believing my eyes, because it was impossible. It had arms that had claw-like hands that hung out in front of it. As it turned its head and looked right at me, the eyes looked yellow and super reflective. Chills shot up my spine as it quickly walked on 2 legs that looked like real dog legs bent backward, traveling from left to right past her garden into an old gravel lane. Then across the thicket of woods and disappeared. I heard the rustling through the weeds. It may have initially traveled from the usual full cow pasture that was up the incline past the spring and up to the cow pasture that was behind Grandma's house. I shuddered to think it was hiding outside of the outhouse I was in, but that is a distinct possibility as well. Ever since that night, after being teased as the cliche of seeing the big bad wolf at Grandma's house, nobody believed me and thought I made it up for attention, like an imaginary friend syndrome of kids. From those teasing me, I just put it all behind, buried the story forever, and never told another human being this tale until now. I just turned 62 years old this year, and I am sharing this tale with you now. Like I said, it's too late to make an official submission. I can't even remember which year it occurred, but I will never forget that creature until the day I die. Alright guys, there's today's upload. I hope you enjoyed the terrifying yet very intriguing encounters I shared with you. I love stories that just kind of blow your mind. The second story is actually one that I covered a while ago, but with the added update from 2016. Very terrifying. I mean, this poor guy is scared shitless, and I would be too. Just imagine seeing something like that as a kid, and years later you are on the same road that has haunted you, and there's this creature that shouldn't exist driving a vehicle. Wow, that is creepy. Anyway guys, I hope you all had a great time listening to this, and I want to thank everybody. And with that, I'm going to bid you all farewell.